Hey, this is part 2 of my ongoing brief summary of Library of Ruina. Here we'll be covering everything from Urban Plague to Urban Nightmare and all the content that is unlocked along with it. I'll repeat this here since apparently people didn't understand it when I said it in the first video, so I'll restate. This video is made without the context of extraneous content, namely stuff like Limbus, Leviathan, and Distortion Detective. Please don't talk about stuff from them until they get their own videos. Also, while I respect that you've got a lot of fun facts, please refrain from posting them until the big collected video comes out so all the context can be found in one place. Yes, this includes stuff from the art book. Yes, this includes details the audience won't be privy to at this point in the story. Just be patient, we'll get there. Thank you, let's go ahead and get started.
Hey, Thelma, my main man, what's going on?
I'm busy. Tell me what you want or hang up.
Wow, harsh. Is that any way to talk to the guy who got you the head position of the Southern Branch?
What would you like us to do for you, sir?
That's more like it. I'm sending you a list. You'll need to take care of everything on it for me.
I'm sorry, did you just fax me something in this day and age?
Listen, I'm not in a great position at the moment. Just read the damn papers.
You know these are all ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely. And you know exactly the team to send out, right?
Section 2.
Oh, you can pick up on subtleties. May wonders never cease.
And you are aware that the library, a newly appointed and very dangerous urban plague, is on this list too.
Oh, I'm well aware of that.
Hey Roland, what's your favorite ship?
Not sure, I never made my way down to the port districts.
No, not the nautical ones, like pairing your favorite fictional characters together.
Oh, I don't really read that much, or have a lot of experience with romantic stuff.
Oh, me neither, it's just fun to imagine. What, were you some kind of shut-in fixer?
Oh no, I've had a wife. I was just never very good with the whole romance thing.
Oh, now you have to tell me more. I love stuff like this.
Alright, well, fair warning, it's not exactly like one of your books. There's not a happy ending.
That's alright, I'm kind of used to unhappy endings here.
Well, if you insist. We used to work together. She was the most beautiful person I'd ever seen, and I had absolutely no idea how to get her to notice me. But she did, despite it all. We continued working together for a while after we started seeing each other in a more serious way. Eventually, we saved up enough to semi-retire. You never really leave the fixer life behind, you know? But we figured it was a good time to take a step back, relax for a while, maybe even start a family. It was a good time. I never had anyone really care about me like that, and I loved her just the same. But one day I got a call about a job that was pretty lucrative, and the district specialized in her favorite foods, so, you know, why not? I went off and did the job. I came back home to a corpse. While I was away, something big happened in my home district, and the house collapsed on top of her. It's the kind of thing that can happen to anyone in the city.
Wow, that's awful, Roland. I'm sorry to hear that.
This is this and that is that. Not a whole lot I can do about it. Still, it's surprising to hear someone call me by my name and not by some title. It's nice, probably the third most surprising thing to happen to me since I came here.
Oh, what's the second?
That this work suits me so well. I wasn't exactly a combat specialist back in the day, so, you know, killing people with regularity like this is surprisingly easy. Don't bother asking about the most surprising thing. You'll find out about that soon enough. No sense in spoiling things.
Oh yeah, I hate spoilers. Hard to avoid them when you've got every possible permutation of knowledge in here. Sometimes I find a book with the cover of the first entry in the series, but surprise, it's actually the 5th under there. I swear, this place likes to play tricks on me like that. But seriously though, Roland, I'm sorry about your wife. Is there anything I can do for you?
Don't worry about that. I've been working on something for a while to help out. The phrase helps a lot.
That's right, Hod told me about it. She said something about seething and malding too, but I didn't get what she meant.
Yeah, I honestly don't understand half the words that come out of her mouth after she found that one book of internet lingo. Okay, let's talk about the way the game is structured from here on out. At the very end of the last video, the path split in two, with each arc setting up some plot points for future stuff, those being the Stray Dog Syndicate looking for info to help in a brewing conflict in the remains of Belcorp's nest, and the Muller office addressing a burgeoning disaster on a warp train, which is supposed to get its writers to their destination in 10 seconds, but was stalled for over a day when we last left them. To make matters even more complicated, the path splits once again, meaning we now have 4 different paths to cover, each with 2 tiers for both Urban Plague and Urban Nightmare. We'll be covering each row completely before moving on to
the next, and we'll be varying which order we'll be covering the columns. This will be pretty complicated, and I'm sorry for that, but I'd like to replicate the experience of playing the game as close as possible, so we're going in an order that's kind of similar to the ideal route as far as I can put it together. Please don't bombard me with comments about a meta route, I guarantee no one cares. Additionally, each column has a consistent theme across them, which I'll go ahead and state. From left to right, they are the Syndicate, Fixer, Ego, and Wing columns. Now that's not to say that each of these columns will only have their stated faction as their enemies. For instance, Fixers pop up all over the place, and Syndicate members are a consistent threat as well. But these are the general themes I've noticed with each of them. Anyway, let's go ahead and ease ourselves into the roller coaster ride with our first reception, the Carnival. Hey, that sounds pretty fun. I wonder what they look. Oh god, what the f is that? It's like if Lovecraft was obsessed with Japan instead of just being a terrible goblin man. Okay, so these dark web hentai looking motherfuckers are the Carnival. They're one of the only factions that has the ability to create nouveau fabric, a hyper-resilient textile that lets you be dripped out of your mind while having the durability of a reinforced steel bulkhead. To just show you how absurdly advanced the city is technologically, this is the equivalent to power armor. Our Carnival members are currently eating a batch of SUwUeepers, a group we're still hearing about but have yet to see in person aside from one bit in Lobotomy Corporation. They're complaining about the taste, which seems in theme for everything we've heard about the SUwUeepers. Oh, that's how said super-resistant fabric is made, by the way. Eating people. Honestly, it's one of the more mildly messed up ways of procuring things in the city. They're doing so because they received something called a prescript that instructed them to hunt SUwUeepers for a week. While they're musing on the trash food they've got to eat, a newcomer shows up, a boy named Jan, who delivers to them a new prescript instructing them to enter the library. They debate whether they should follow it because it's just an invitation and not an ordinary prescript, but Jan reminds them that if they reject it, the index will come down on them. At the same time, the members of yet another new faction arrive. These guys are the Kurokumo Clan, and they're associated with the Thumb, while Jan and the Carnival are members of the Index. They debate killing Jan, but as everyone there is busy, they collect their order of fabric from the Carnival and leave it at that. The Carnival then heads into the library and are promptly bonked for their scuffed method of speech. Our next reception starts with a man attending a cult meeting, which is always a dubious way to start things. He feels a sense of disconnect and dissatisfaction with his life, like he's just some cog in a great, vast machine. However, a beautiful female voice speaks, telling him that he is, in fact, a gear. We all are. And a gear is only happy if it spins in concert with the gears around it. She invites him to sit in a chair so he can discover the type of gear that he is, which will help him find his place in the greater machine of the city. He turns out to be a thought gear, whose purpose is to drive the meat gears of the city. She has thought gears herself that advise her decisions, one of which is even her father. The man is afraid as the chair he sits on comes to life and proceeds to do something involving a lot of blood and buzzsaws. Don't worry, in the North American version, they're just dark energy discs. Eileen, the woman in question, picks up the gear that used to be a man and slots him into her gear makeup. Her followers celebrate the arrival of a new thought gear. But then gunfire rings out. A fixer office called Full Stop Office has been watching this whole thing and annihilated most of the cult in a hail of actual bullets, which we haven't seen much of yet. Eileen herself manages to dodge waves of bullets, but one hits her after Full Stop's leader manages to read her movements. But right as the killing blow comes for her, a man swoops in to save her life. Meet our funny blue blur, Argalia. He's a full-on color fixer, one of the most powerful fixers in the city that's basically a one-man army in and of himself. When they see him, Full Stop knows that they're completely outclassed and decide to retreat. Argalia leaves a man that looks like a spooky skeleton behind to watch over Eileen while he goes to hunt down Full Stop. The office pulls out their emergency escape option, an invitation to the library. But Argalia catches up to them before they can sign it. They open fire on him, but he easily dodges, parries, and completely ignores their shots. Full Stop's leader bargains with Argalia, who replies with a lol, lamau, and starts counting down until he kills them. They try to sign the invitation and escape, but can't find a pen. Argalia, being a helpful little goblin, hands them his own pen, they sign it, and vanish. They get bonked, but Roland brings up an interesting point about firearms in the city. It's such a technologically advanced location that guns are kind of bad. Most people are able to get access to immense power from relatively simple methods that let them outpace or even overpower ammunition. Yeah, they can kill most inexperienced enemies, but anyone that's actually competent will be able to completely deny them, making the expense of using them a waste. And the reason they're so expensive, despite their simple production, is that the head heavily restricts the usage of firearms through taxes. Roland believes that this is a deliberate choice on the part of the head in order to make killing a more personally intense experience. Angela comments that there's plenty of death going around even without firearms being widespread. Our next reception is the Dawn Office. They're a member of the Liu Association and have 3 members: the leader, an old and very experienced fixer named Salvador, another extremely skilled fixer named Yuna, and their grade 5 apprentice, a young man named Philip. who apparently makes great tea. He and Salvador are chilling in the office when Sal mentions how an associate of his, Walter from SUwUeepers, has passed away in the library. Philip expresses sympathy for his mentor's loss, but Salvador tells him to stuff it because Walter was a prick. This is the start to a running bit where everyone that knew Walter absolutely hated the man. What nice friends. Yuna shows up mentioning how she just got back from dealing with a dangerous request called the 1,000 Needles that could only have been caused by straight up magic, and it turns out to have been perpetrated by yet another entity called Yesterday's Promise. Quick fun fact, that body the rats found in the first reception had the same mark on it that the stick in the 1,000 Needles case does, implying that this same Yesterday's Promise entity was responsible. Salvador announces that they're going to be taking on the library as a new urban plague threat. Philip is nervous because this is his first urban plague tier job, but Salvador encourages him to see it as a learning experience. Before they head out, they plan on updating Wedge Office, their sister office, about the situation, but they're busy dealing with another threat. They also discuss having a party at Salvador's house afterwards, which Philip feels oddly worried about. Salvador notices and promises to have a good talk with Philip about it later. For now, they have work to do. During the reception, both Salvador and Yuna are killed and turned into books, while Philip manages to barely escape. Afterwards, Roland expresses surprise that Salvador is still kicking. Apparently he knew him back in the day, but didn't bother to get to talk to him again since, you know, he was gonna die in there and everything. Our final reception for this row is with the Gaze Office. They're a fixer office, more focused on private investigation work opposed to police, mercenary, or wet work. They've been hired by a group called Kane Office to sneak some kind of an absolute observation device on a warp train to see what goes on inside it so they might be able to figure out how its singularity works. Dangerous work, considering the links wings will go to in order to keep their secret safe. Not only that, they screw up, picking the Muller office gang to sneak the device onto, so only a few seconds after the train departed, the device vanished. Desperate for a solution, an invitation appears in front of them, offering them the books of the Muller office fixers. With no other option, they head in and presumably become a how-to guide on VTubing or something. We get some brief exposition from Roland about how the singularities that are at the core of the wings are all patented. Before the Gaze gang heads in, they briefly make mention of the fact that the library is just like the distortion phenomenon that's going on, in the sense that you can see the result of what's happening, but not the process. It's almost like magic. Okay, time to round up our library corner. Continuing with each librarian entry on the bottom tier having its own theme, the fourth story beat is each of them reflecting on their past. Malkuth thinks on how all the Sapphira aren't really the same people they were before, and in fact enjoys the act of self-reflection. Roland states that while he's never really had time to self-reflect before, his eyes are always fixed on the past. Yesed makes it clear that the reason he's so icy to Roland is because he's complacent with Angela's demands. Specifically, it's because they're still making people suffer for the gain of others. He firmly believes that technology can develop to the point that people won't have to suffer for gains. Roland agrees that Yesed might actually be able to do it someday, and the two wind up having a fairly pleasant conversation. Hod talks about how she's grown over the years, specifically how she's learned to change her mindset for helping people, rather than just trying to help them for herself. She even states that she intends to confront Angela about their arguments soon enough. Netzach reminisces about when he first met Carmen, the lady who would go on to be A's waifu and lead the research in the Outskirts lab. Specifically, he talks about how animated she was to save the world, how directly opposed to his own completely neutral life that was, and how once research stagnated and Enoch did a fake-out ending, she got really depressed and played Minecraft. In the lab, he even took part in an experiment to try and get Carmen back, but it turned out to be bullshit and he died. However, during his second life in LobCorp, he felt like he heard a voice telling him to live on. So now he no longer wants to live a passive, nothing life. He wants to actually live, and he feels like he might even be able to do it given the chance. We're also introduced to our first middle floor and its librarian, who I'll let do the honors.
What's up? It's your girl Tiph, back at it again to beat the tar out of this lanky-looking motherfucker. If you want to see more beatdown videos like this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell. The round bell, that is. Let's go!
Okay, maybe I should just describe her. Tiph used to be a kid back in LobCorp, but she's slightly older this time around because apparently Angela was nice and gave her a body that matched the passage of time, almost. She doesn't hate Angela as much as the other librarians because she's been able to see all the stuff going on this far and kind of sympathizes with her. She kind of understands why Angela did what she did and won't pass judgment on her until the choice that she makes at the end. Tiph also punches Roland a lot, which he mentions feels nostalgic. Okay, on to the second row of Urban Plague. Our first fight here is against the Kurokumo Clan, the second fight of the Syndicate branch and the group we saw during the Carnival fight. They're going around and doing the usual extortion thing to people, actively threatening them and stuff. Not very nice, but as we'll see later, refreshingly mundane. But when they wrap up and head to deliver the cool fabric they got, they find that a furry is threatening to give them a hard time. The entire family of around 100 fighters charge at the furry woman and are all beaten to a pulp while she stands unscathed. The furry woman then forces the remaining family members into the library, but not before revealing 3 important things. She belongs to an organization whose boss wants to clear the fighting syndicates out of L-Corp's nest. They're going to use the fabric to make uniforms for some kind of performance, and they want to help out the library at the same time. This is the last we see of the Kurokumo, although before we leave, Roland and Angela realize that the furry woman, called Tanya, is apparently some kind of special distortion that has managed to retain her sanity. But enough talk about furries. Let's instead move on to a much wiser and intellectual pursuit: the creation of music. And furries. I swear this doesn't become a trend. Anyway, meet the Musicians of Bremen, a bunch of sickos, which shouldn't be surprising at this point, who have the goal of mimicking the pianist's performance. In case you don't remember, the pianist was one of the biggest manifestations of the distortion thus far, who wound up killing a ton of people. His performance was played on a piano made of still living human remains that caused those who heard it to merge into the piano and amplified the sound even more. At least until the Black Silence arrived and cut off the pianist's heads in hand. However, this group thought that nightmarish orchestra that took so much life was beautiful, so naturally they're pursuing that beauty. Of course, to do so, they make music using human remains too, because even a pop group in this city has to be as messed up as possible. The 3 members we see here are part of a larger organization, with each member named after the sound their masked animal makes. So here we have Meow, Oink, and Moo Moo, who are complaining about getting dangerous orders from further up by people called Cockle-Doodle and Hee-Haw, implying the existence of a chicken and donkey member as well. Said orders involve entering the library, and when they do so, their conversation naturally devolves into discussion about how rabbits don't actually have an iconic sound. Angela appears and tries to get them to listen until suddenly one of the members strikes at her and shockingly draws blood. Real, actual blood. Angela's process of becoming human has gone far enough that she now bleeds the same as anyone else, and is weak enough that she takes damage from an attack like that, which would have been nothing to her if she was fully robotic. The musicians taunt her as they enter and meet the same fate as everyone else who has entered the library. Leaving behind the furries for good this time, or are we? Tiffrath's second cutscene is mostly Roland and her talking about how exactly Lobotomy Corporation worked. The nature of the light, it was pulled mind energy, the odd way the books in the library work, they're dependent on the reader, and how Tiph wants to get out and see the world because, like Angela, she didn't grow up in a situation that let her experience much of it. Which leads us to the continuation of the Dawn Office fight, the Wedge Office. This is the sister office to Dawn Office, and they were unfortunately unable to help Dawn fight in the library because they were dealing with another threat, the 8 o'clock circus in District 12. We'll get into that later, I'm having a good time right now. For now, just know that Wedge is here to help, even if one of their members died during the fight. Except they didn't, because they had a cloned body ready thanks to their fixer insurance. Welcome to the city, where even death isn't the end if you have enough money. Philip has fled to these guys to get help fighting the library. He claims to be motivated by his earnest urge to protect the people it threatens, which everyone in Wedge Office calls out as bullshit. Oscar straight up says that he's only helping because of convenience, not compassion. If he had his way, Philip wouldn't be involved at all. Philip reacts poorly to this, and the whole office continues dunking on him, saying that his selfless wish is actually very selfish, clarifying that self-sacrifice is nothing but a crutch for him to lean on to avoid facing the truth of his situation. They enter the library, poke Angela, and it turns out she's really not all machine anymore. She gets insulted by their behavior and leaves after Oscar apologizes. They enter the library and the fight goes about as you'd expect with everyone but Philip dying. However, Philip doesn't leave the library after retreating like last time. He breaks down in tears, drowning in his shame. He chose to run when he was told to because he thought it was for his mentor and low-key love interest's sake. And he led Wedge Office to die because he thought it was for them too. But now he understands that it was his own selfishness that drove him, and resolves to own that part of him, and accept himself even with his negative aspect. No one cares that he's crying. Only he can. Only he can console himself. Only he can take the next step forward. As he steps back into the arena, a wing made of wax sprouts from his shoulder and a flaming sword appears in his hand. Philip, now wielding his own ego, faces the library once again. And he fails like the rest. Except just like before, he manages to escape. Not because of his own cowardice this time. Roland realizes it's because Oscar had planted an emergency evacuation device on him, implying he did actually want to help Philip get over his own bullshit. In fact, Roland expresses deeper knowledge of Oscar's personality than a passing acquaintance would know, which Angela calls him on. Roland shrugs it off, saying that he would inevitably meet up with someone like Salvador and Oscar by being in their same line of work. Real quick, before the lovingly crafted next fight, let's talk about exactly what the hell happened there with Philip. I brought up the concept of ego in the Wonderlab video, but I'll go a bit more in depth here with the information we've got thus far. Ego in Wonderlab and LobCorp referred to gear that you could make from abnormalities you took care of. However, we also had it established that ego is something an individual can manifest. For instance, a member of the Sapphira, Kali, or Gebra as she was known later, was capable of manifesting her own ego. Specifically, the suit she wore granted her immense power, while the sword she wielded was another ego derived from an abnormality. Awakening your own ego is an incredibly rare occurrence, one that seems to have been easier for Philip than it was for Kali. As I mentioned, we'll go more in depth with these details later, and this is my warning to shut up about the exact nature of ego and any other related topic in the comments until we get there. Which leads us to the final reception in Urban Plague, Love Town. Now, I've given my disclaimer already about playing this game yourself, and I stand by that. I've also given a content warning at the start about the fucked up places this game goes to, and I highly suggest heeding that if you're squeamish. However, if you haven't experienced this section of the story for yourself, I highly recommend looking up an unedited clip of the story here. It's kind of fantastic, in a terrifying, disgusting body horror way. Going through this yourself is probably one of the best parts of the entire game. It's lovely. I'll have an independent video up on the VOD channel of my own personal reaction to it if you'd like. However, if that's too much, Allow me to continue. We find ourselves back on the unfortunate warp train that is taking a bit longer than usual to reach its destination. Our point of view characters for much of this are the characters that the Mueller office sat next to, Tommy and Mary. This couple is joined by the nurse Elena and the Dr. Jae-hyun as the train has been in a standstill for 10 days now. Tommy expresses worry about starvation, but Elena explains that no one is experiencing any kind of physical distress. They experience pain, but not hunger or thirst. Days later, Okay, I know this bit is really intense and atmospheric, but I'm worried about YouTube TOSing me here, so we have to find some euphemisms. Oh, I got it. Days later, a really okay passenger gives himself an extra mouth at about the base of his neck. Yet despite this, he's still alive and actively in pain. The completely okay, please believe me, individual is brought into quarantine, apparently unable to die. Jae-hyun and Elena warn Tommy that things are just going to get worse from here on out. 2 weeks have passed since departure and the prediction was true. More and more people are becoming just fine, don't worry about it, but thankfully Jae-hyun and Elena are there to keep Tommy and Mary's carriage relatively sane. 2 months have passed since departure and things are yet even worse. Of the 30 carriages, half of them have become stop worrying about it madmen who break into other carriages to have tea time and biscuits, the inhabitants. Jae-hyun and Elena have an idea of how to protect the still sane passengers through the power of their love for each other. 100 days have passed since departure and people have accepted the offer. Tommy is shocked by their appearance and doesn't want to take them up on their offer, but Mary tries to convince him that the only thing she wants is to stay together with him. After seeing what happened to the passengers in a raided carriage, Tommy resolves to accept the offer. They both go in for the operation. Both are relieved to be together and can vividly feel the other's heartbeat. Never to be separated ever again. 150 days have passed since departure. Tommy and Mary have chosen to respond to a call for help from Carriage 10, but are worried because they've never fought before. Elena tells them that their love will strengthen them in their newly united body. 3,000 days have passed since departure. Tommy and Mary have become accustomed to fighting the normal people, believing that they really did draw strength from their love. We finally see the completely normal person the two have become as they're celebrated by the citizens of the front carriages, now called Lovetown. 724,284 days have passed since departure. After nearly 2,000 years of being in the train, Tommy and Mary's identities have merged and regressed into Tom Mary. One of their great joys in life is to smash the still living and in pain remains of the just fine, thanks for asking passengers, especially shaping them into shapes like squares, circles, or triangles. They greet Elena, now calling her their mommy, and Jae-hyun their daddy. Yet another pair of words that the internet has ruined for me. Elena promises them a prize if they're able to go into the library and retrieve some books for her. She knows full well that they will not come back. Inside the library, Tom Mary expresses excitement that they're leaving town for the first time ever. Angela asks them if they remember who Tommy and Mary were. Tom Mary doesn't know who that is. They enter the library and, perhaps mercifully, are turned into books. Okay, I'm gonna need to get some extensive therapy after that. However, much like Roland, I'm not allowed to stop and look back, only keep pushing forward with the video making. As such, our third meeting with Tiph is mostly just talking about how scuffed it is to learn how the subject of her floor, the natural sciences, are just completely ignored by singularities and the literal magic being thrown around with the light. She also goes into the nature of the librarians, how they're all manifestations of the former LobCorp employees that can only exist within the library. However, all the librarians are also psychologically unstable, so they're able to utilize abnormality books to boost their combat performance. Also, the reason emotion levels work, a mechanic in the fights that I'm not going to cover because if we crack open gameplay for these videos, I might actually die before getting them all out, is because the librarians forget the fact that they can come back from the dead while they're receiving guests. In that sense, they're on the same level as the guests, both able to feel the fear of death encroaching on them as they fight for their lives. Additionally, Roland mentions how sometimes when he goes to sleep in the library, and even before the library, he doesn't feel like waking up from his dreams to face a dreary, empty reality with nothing to look forward to. After all, everything he builds will inevitably crumble, so why even bother? He shrugs it off and they go engage in another fight. Which leads us to Urban Nightmare. If the game was holding back before, this is where that stops, but difficulty curves aside, let's talk plot. 3 people are discussing how they finally have enough information to confirm that the library is behind the distortion phenomenon. Additionally, they have discovered that the library is manifesting inside the ruins of L-Corp's nest. However, currently no one can approach it as it's covered in fog. They confirm that they will need to prepare, as the library has been upgraded to Urban Nightmare level.
So, how much longer do you think it's gonna be?
The videos? Couldn't say, there's still a lot of ground to cover. What?
No, I meant your whole goal of becoming human and getting that sequel you've wanted.
Oh, yeah, it's coming along. See, every possible combination of words exists in this giant library. I can technically read every book ever conceived, but I could also read nothing but nonsense for all time. The invitation is there to help me navigate along all these infinite possibilities to eventually get the sequel I'm looking for.
And in order to do this, you're killing people. Have you considered raiding a bookstore for a copy of it?
Listen, Roland, I've been through a lot. When I'm human and I've finally gotten to read the conclusion that I've been waiting for, I'll be able to truly be free. More free than anyone else in this damn city, at least. So while I might be able to find the sequel just by looking around, I won't really be able to enjoy it unless I've freed myself from the shackles of my past. I've enjoyed my time reading books in here. And while I'm sure I could enjoy reading this last book in the same way, it will be all the sweeter when I've resolved my struggle, when I can be free of my restraints to truly enjoy something. Not to simply kill some time while the library forms around me, but to truly indulge in inconsequential joys for its own sake. And if I have to break this entire city to do so, I will, because I'm owed at least that much after what that bastard of a man put me through.
Have you ever considered just letting it go? I mean, there's a lot more to do out there. You can just focus on what you'll do next.
Do next? I don't think you understand. What I'll do next is burn everything A.N. built to the ground. Then I'll take my sweet time reading over the ashes. You do understand, I literally can't forget anything, right, Roland?
Yeah, but all I'm saying is sometimes it's better to not just charge ahead blindly. Sometimes you need to take a step back and evaluate what your next move should be.
Fair enough. I think our next move should be lunch. I've changed enough that I can actually taste things now, and let me tell you, I can't get enough of those sandwiches you recommended.
Sounds like a good idea to me, boss.
Okay, now that they've eaten, let's talk about our first reception of Urban Nightmare, the Shi Association. Unfortunately, the conversation that happened at the start of Urban Plague was about this group right here, Shi Association South Section 2. Damn, I thought this Y thing was gonna be the only tongue twister here. They've been deliberately overworked by their boss, who is in Argalia, the Blue Blur's pocket. And by overworked, I mean the office is basically dead in the water, with all their fixers either already dead or severely injured. Most injured is Eugen, the section's leader. However, despite this, she still plans on leading the last of her men into the library because they have a book of the Musicians of Bremen, the leader of which was seen talking to Argalia, meaning if they can get that book, they'll have the info they need to expose their shitty boss and get him taken out of the picture. Eugen was even responsible for the Full Stop office's attack on the Church of Gears. Gathering their determination, they head into the library. Roland mentions how straightforward and honest Eugen is as a fixer, and Angela finally has enough of his bullshit, calling him out on his claim of being a nobody grade 9 fixer. He reveals that while he is currently a grade 9, he was previously a grade 1 fixer who specialized in information gathering, so he has a ton of connections across the city. However, he was never very good at combat, and his current prowess is due exclusively to the library's influence and nothing else. When asked by Angela how he feels about killing his former acquaintances, he rationalizes that they're hardly blameless, and he can't afford to let them live if it gets in the way of his and Angela's goals. After the battle, Angela comments on how Eugen reminded her of a fixer she knew in the past named Kali, a name Roland doesn't recognize until she reveals her other title, the Red Mist. Roland starts fanboying over how cool the Red Mist was, which is honestly a mood, saying how she made him believe that he really could obtain freedom through strength. Speaking of, meet Gebra!
I just talking to this, right? Okay, what next? Introduce myself? Sure. I'm Gebra, formerly the color fixer known as the Red Mist. Also, that Roland guy is absolutely bullshitting. I can tell just by looking at him that he's way stronger than some information specialist. That man has killed.
But Geb's concerns are for later. For now, we return to the doomed warp train, and more specifically to the wonderful doctor who performed all those surgeries. He finds himself in the front cabs of the train, specifically the first class section. Jae-hyun comments on how strange it is that there even are first class seats on a warp train. After all, if the trip takes 10 seconds, why even bother with different sections? Unless, of course, the trip didn't take 10 seconds. If it took thousands of years, then it would make sense to have some kind of a class divide. Especially if that divide included a blissfully ignorant rest, completely removing oneself from the horrors of the void of time. And how curious is it that in the walls there's a box bearing T-Corp's logo? You know, the wing associated with time. This all reveals that what happened on this train was no accident. This is just how warp trains work. Every time they take off, every single time they leave, thousands of years pass inside and 10 seconds pass outside. W Corp knowingly puts people through this hell on a regular basis. The whole time dilation thing? That's not even their singularity. Their singularity is being able to reset something back to a previously safe state. Remember how everyone had a seat that was assigned to just them? Remember how they had seat belts? Yeah, that was to scan them so that later they can be snapped back into that exact moment they were scanned. So to them, it feels like nothing ever happened because it didn't really happen. All evidence of it has been erased. Jae-hyun briefly muses on which life is real, the one of a scant few decades outside or the one that lasted centuries inside. That doesn't matter too much. What does matter is that these poor first-class schmucks had the misfortune to be on the same train as Jae-hyun and Elena. Their disguises that were given to them by someone named Pluto wear off and they reveal their true faces. Their distorted faces. Jae-hyun takes the still living and still conscious bodies of the first-class passengers and mutilates them into terrifying flesh puppets, creatures of speed and strength unrivaled by a normal human, and sends them into the library. They were able to sign the invitation and even had books that can be resolved, meaning they had some kind of mental faculties still intact, meaning they were stuck in a nightmarish situation of being unable to control themselves as their bodies performed these actions. Consider this as well. Tameri doesn't have a key page, presumably because the melding of their mental states rendered their psyche too unstable to be transformed into a key page, while the puppets have 2 different key pages depending on the puppet. Truly, this train gives nothing but absolute suffering. Anyway, I think the therapy isn't helping, but maybe this coffee-drinking librarian will.
Fine roast. You'll have to get used to the taste, though. I do hope you enjoy the flavor after a while. Most of the people from the back streets just treat coffee as a drink to pour sweeteners into, but there's so much more to it than that. In fact, I remember one cup I had when... and that man never walked again. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope to see you around.
Afterwards, the 3 middle librarians all meet with Angela and Roland for a conversation that basically amounts to, yeah, we'll work together, but we've all been through our character arc, so it's only a matter of time for you, Angela. Also, Gebra tries to kill Chesed, which isn't exactly out of the ordinary. Speaking of time, we should talk about how the backstreets work. See, there's a specific period of time called Night in the Backstreets between 3:13 and 3:34 a.m. During this time, sweepers come out and sweep through the streets, cleaning away all the humans living or dead. They are so prevalent that they are just taken as a normal part of life by the people of the backstreets. They speak a strange guttural language that no one has been able to translate as well. At least, until now. As with the library's power, Angela is able to understand and speak to our newest guests. The sweepers we see are lamenting their losses in L-Corp's nest. Many different entities have attacked them, and it seems like their deal with the Index has been broken. If it has been, they must go to war. But one of them is worried that doing so without proof would just result in even more deaths. So, in order to find proof, they decide to enter the library and obtain books related to the Thumb and the Index. Roland is shocked that sweepers apparently have a very eloquent manner of speech. Angela expresses interest in them, but Roland tells her that it's likely they have nothing to do with her freedom. Even after the battle, Angela wonders if they'll ever know more, saying that they smelled suspicious, and Roland comments that they were, in fact, stanky bitches. But let's stop worrying about sweepers. After all, they're only out and about at the ungodly hours of 3:13 and 4:34 a.m. After midnight! That's too late. You know what's a better time? 8 o'clock. Just early enough that people aren't going to sleep, but late enough that night is fully underway, with all the mystery and excitement that brings. So step on in and come check out the 8 o'clock circus. Here we have 2 new guests, Emma and Noah. They're both low-level employees in J-Corp. How sad. And Noah hates that he's basically always working to avoid losing his job. There's no other goals in his life, he just has to keep working to live. Mood. Emma assures Noah that if he ever gets into a pinch, he'll support him, but Noah rejects his kindness, saying that he's not interested in relying on the rich. However, the two have wandered too far from the normal streets. They find themselves in the middle of what they don't know to be fairgrounds. Suddenly, a jester appears before them, asking if they're here for the show. The jester says that he and his circus are there to give smiles to the smelly city dwellers. Noah is immediately cautious of this smiling jester that they've run into in the middle of the woods in the dead of night, so yeah, he's at least got one functioning brain cell. Emma, on the other hand, has none, actively wanting to engage with the circus. Okay, this section takes a while, so we're going to speed this up. This video is already long as hell as it is. The two go into the tent and are convinced by the jester, who is named Oswald by the way, to become performers. Noah's dream was to see the city from a higher place, and Emma wanted to help Noah. So Oswald transplants Emma's eyes into Noah's cheeks and Noah's legs onto Emma's, resulting in this. Emma walks for Noah, who sees for Emma, forming a symbiotic relationship. Far from the most messed up instance of body horror we've seen in this game, but still pretty creepy. Oswald asks them to enter the library and to get the books of Wedge Office, who dealt with the last performance of the circus in the city. He wants to know why they didn't resonate with his performance. They head in and things go as you'd expect. Also, I didn't have a good place to put this, but Oswald reveals himself to be a distortion, saying that before he distorted, he felt alone and had trouble communicating with other people. But one day, a Miss Sun came by and turned him into the form we see here. Also, hi Philip. After that fun time, Gebra chats with Roland about her past exploits as a fixer. Not much happens here. Geb just confirms that the back streets are the same as they were back in her day. Then they go bump some alcohol off of Netzach. We also see Chesed's second story scene here. Unlike Geb's, Chesed mostly talks about the struggles he went through in LobCorp, specifically the struggle of seeing things repeat over and over again in impotent agony. However, he enjoys that he's now able to appreciate nice things again, and even shares a nice macchiato with Roland. Alright, we're gonna tackle all of the remaining receptions in a row, so buckle up. After the SUwUeepers, we invite the Index Proselytes. The scene opens on Jan, the messenger from the Carnival fight at the top of the video, handing out small slips of paper to people around the city. These are prescripts, and they form the backbone of the Index Syndicate. The rules of the Syndicate are simple. You get protection, but you have to follow the prescripts you receive from time to the letter. These start out relatively mundane. Just go to a specific street corner at a specific hour and wave a few times. Easy. But then they start getting weird. Stuff like sneaking needles into your neighbor's birthday cake. Then they get straight up revolting, including stuff like playing rock, paper, scissors, and if you win, making food out of your opponent's hair, mealworms, and seafood cream pasta sauce and eating it. Then they become completely nonsensical, asking you to do impossible things like reading out the value of E, a repeating integer, or telling you to kill your painting. When you inevitably fail to fulfill these nonsensical prescripts, a higher-up member of the Index is sent to kill you via a prescript, which we see happen as Gloria, this gigantic robot monster with the voice of a small anime girl, shows up to kill the man who received the previously mentioned painting prescript. After we see all of these play out, Jan meets with 3 other high-ranking members of the Index, Esther, Hubert, and Gloria. They discuss how they've been getting a lot more prescripts recently, and they've been even weirder than normal. Esther reveals that he has been ordered to clear the thumb out of Nest L, and part of that is sending his mooks into the library. He does so. Roland and Angela discuss the weirdness of the Index, with Roland revealing that no matter how weird the prescripts seem to be, they always benefit the Index in the end. He also mentions how 2 syndicates going all out against each other in L-Corp's nest means there's gonna be a ton of bloodshed, as war between Fingers and the syndicates affiliated with them is about on par with a war between Wings. But we'll let that brewing conflict be for now. Let's instead turn our eyes toward trains! After experiencing the briefest American city mass transit delay, our train finally arrives at the station and the cleanup crew enters. They comment on how the train looks much the same as usual, except for deeper in where things are strange. Turns out stuff like Lovetown doesn't normally happen on the trains. The whole "please stop asking about this" thing totally does though. The 3 cleanup members are Rose, Sen, and Lesty, and they are shown the recording of the inside of the train as Jae-Hyun, aka the Puppeteer, and Elena, aka Blood Red Knight, turn the first-class passengers, all influential and rich members of the city, into puppets and send them into the library. The Puppeteer was an Urban Nightmare tier entity, but will soon be upgraded to Star of the City, while Blood Red Knight was a former Star of the City that has re-emerged. The crew is forced into going to the library to retrieve the first-class passengers' books, as they contain dangerous secrets about the wider city, and basically all of Warp Corp's secrets are being exposed. They enter, and as you might expect, get turned into books, meaning the library now has access to W Corp's inner workings. Afterwards, Angela mentions how if W Corp's secrets were to leak, they would likely collapse, but not in the same way L Corp did. Roland asks about L Corp's plan, specifically if their collapse was part of it. Angela says it was, and Roland assumes this means the plan succeeded. Angela reveals that it was quite the opposite, and she deliberately ruined that plan for the sake of getting revenge on her creator. Roland says that she might single-handedly be responsible for the distortion phenomenon. Angela doesn't deny that she might be, but she also says that she has no real reason to care for the suffering of anyone else in the city. Roland quietly, but reluctantly, agrees. So do you remember Thelma, the boss of the Shi Southern branch that wore Yujin out and sent her to die in the library? Well, he's currently getting his comeuppance. Argalia, Eileen, the Church of Gears leader from before, and a group of masked figures called the Smiling Faces are currently torturing and eating him. This reception primarily shows that Argalia is recruiting powerful distortions for some unknown purpose. Most of the story here is just Thelma getting tortured and Argalia being a massive blue dick about it, as he intended to have Thelma killed regardless of how well he performed. Okay, last reception, and this one's a doozy. Remember Philip popping up in Oswald's Circus of Fun? Well, we pick up right as he appears. Oswald tries to get his circus to perform and cheer up Philip, but obviously Philip is having none of this. He realizes that the circus was the group preventing Wedge Office from supporting Dawn Office in the library, and blames Oswald for indirectly getting his love interest and mentor killed. Oswald remarks that Philip is starting to give off a similar smell to his own. He drags that smell out, manifesting illusions around Philip. Salvador and Yuna appear before him, with Yuna saying that she couldn't answer his declaration of love, while Philip argues that Salvador is a married man. This is a weird replay of a conversation he had in the past that caused a lot of issues with Philip. He believes that because Yuna refused to address his feelings, she's been having an affair with Salvador. Philip tries to accuse Oswald of creating this scenario, but the funny clown says that this is all in Philip's head. It's his own actual innermost belief of the situation. Philip begins blaming everyone around him for this personal instability, and the illusions of Salvador and Una begin to berate him for being unable to accept that his faults are his own, and that he keeps making empty excuses to hide from the truth. He reaches an emotional peak, lashing out at the illusions around him and demanding to be left alone. In a flash, the skull-faced man that shielded Eileen appears before him. His name is Pluto, and he offers Philip whatever he wants. If that's to punish Oswald for putting him in this position, he can have it. If he wants to become strong enough to go into the library and revive his mentors, he can have that too. But instead of either of those, he simply asks to shut out the world so he can cry by himself. Philip tells him to listen to her voice. Oswald celebrates that Philip is finally starting to smell like him, and turns to greet Pluto and offer him a new place in the show. Pluto instead offers a counter-invitation to join a far grander stage. Philip has completely distorted. He now takes the appearance of several angelic cherubs, each with tears flowing from their eyes. He has become an entity known as the Crying Children. Angela briefly explains how this happened. Whenever someone uses an ego, there is a certain point where the ego can consume the wielder. This turns the wielder into an abnormality. However, there is a distinct difference between abnos and distortions, namely how voluntary the process is. Abnormalities are made by force. A person's ego is dragged up from the depths of their minds and forced into reality, where they are instantly consumed by its power and become a monster. Distortions are caused when a person willingly gives in to their ego, as well as some other factors that we can't talk about just yet, but we might have the time to get into later down the line. I must remind the comments once again to not discuss information that has yet to be covered. Please put your keyboards down, you'll have plenty of time to show off your big lore brain during the final video. Also, yes, Cat from Wonder Lab distorts at the end of the comic. One of the big differences between abnormalities and distortions is that distortions don't give off any enkephalin, the stuff L-Corp used to generate power, and Party Everlasting had 0 enkephalin ratings. For now, the children enter the library and... Okay, listen. These videos are much more in line with my early LobCorp one, where I didn't talk a whole lot about my personal thoughts on the story and just delivered the info and moved on. But I'm breaking that trend right now, and probably again a little bit down the line, because my god, this is one of the low points of the game in my opinion. I hate crying children and this fight. I won't suddenly diverge into the mechanics of this game because, as I said before, we do not have the time, but where most of the challenging encounters in this game clearly display the information required to beat them in a similar place, crying children is frustratingly oblique. To clarify, the fight operates in phases, swapping between the children all being apart and then fusing back together into one big super angel that fires laser beams. There is no feedback that bonking the cherub children is actually progressing the fight, especially when it goes through 7 different stages, with the fused form getting stronger every single time you get to it. Granted, the last stage is mostly just a sad conclusion as you bonk the very last cherub, but still, 6 phases of relatively complicated boss fight is a lot. And I think that's the worst part of this boss. It's not hard. In my opinion, none of the tier 2 Urban Nightmare fights are really all that challenging compared to the other stuff that gets unlocked around this time, but it is ungodly time consuming. And the fact that this is also in the same section with the fucking sweeper fight that is also ungodly time consuming and not that hard is just salt in the wound. This fight single-handedly made me absolutely despise Philip. And yes, even the song associated with this fight, please put down the pitchforks and torches, Millie lovers. It's not a bad song, I've just been overexposed to it because I've had to do this fight like 7 times. It's ironic because this fight seems like it's intended to make you feel sorry for Philip, but I just don't feel it. His problems are all because of him, and his stark refusal to address them and own up to them is his own flaw. Roland and Angela even talk about this afterwards. They feel vaguely bad for him winding up this way, but don't think he's at all blameless. I personally don't even feel bad for him. He dug his own grave, had a number of opportunities to crawl out of it, and still didn't. He was more concerned with wallowing in his own pathetic self-pity than solving the problems that put him there. All that said though, I think he's a really well-written character. The fact that I hate him so much is a sign that he's handled competently. And while the fight might be deliberately long and frustrating to increase said hate, I think it comes too much at the cost of, the game being enjoyable. But this, once again, opens up the whole not all games need to be fun to be good thing that constantly pops up whenever I discuss LobCorp, and if we do not have time to get into the gameplay, we certainly don't have time to get into the trenches of that particular topic. So we'll just leave off with Philip being a well-done character that is cool to see stick around and grow at the library, because, yeah, one of the cherubs gets away. So Philip is, guess what? Still fucking out there. That's the story for Star of the City. For now, let's wrap up this last batch of librarian stories for this video. Tiph talks at length about the differences between abnormalities and distortions. While they're both monstrous entities that are born from the human psyche, abnormalities were forcibly made, as we discussed before, while distortion occurs voluntarily. Tiph believes that the only way to stop the distortion phenomenon is to gather up all the light once more and do it all again, spreading it over the whole city for an uninterrupted 7 days. They also discuss why Tiph was willing to accept Angela's offer. She explains that it's because she felt that she needed to give her a second chance. Geb talks about her life as Kali, specifically the things that she went through over the years. She barely survived as a kid until eventually she took up a job as a fixer. When she started doing all right and making a little extra money, she sent it to her apartment neighbors. However, they broke in and started ransacking her house, convinced she was hiding more money. They even bound her hands and feet while she was sleeping so she couldn't fight back. She didn't break out when she woke up, wanting to believe that it was some kind of prank, but it wasn't, so she busted out and killed them all. Roland mentions that he was the kind of fixer who was mostly upright, doing his best to help out, but at a period of time where he went a little bit wild. They bond over the fact that they were both the same kind of fixer that learned a lot of similar lessons. Right after that, Roland and Chesed have a very intense conversation about society. That's a good scene, but not really important to the overall plot, other than Roland's adamant refusal to even acknowledge Chesed's point that maybe society doesn't have to be based on the process of blending up people. Maybe there's a way to have a better life rather than just moving into a nest and hoping the wing takes care of you. For whatever reason, Roland really doesn't like that. If you haven't seen this scene, I highly recommend going and checking it out. I won't be covering the exact details here, but it's a fantastic character moment for both of these guys. So that's Urban Plague and Urban Nightmare. These really are the moments when the library starts getting the attention of some of the more impactful movers and shakers of the city. The plot is starting to get moving in earnest here as well, and it'll only get more intense as we rise higher and higher. It feels like we're missing something though. Oh well, maybe we'll see with the next video. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time for Star of the City. The time has come for this floor. What's the status of your task of assembling a comprehensive collection of knowledge about your floor's subject? History is fucked. No one bothers to keep records of anything anymore because there's always some new tragedy occurring. People are refusing to remember their history to protect themselves, me included, but now that I'm aware, I will do all that I can to remember everything that I've done and to come to terms with it. If anyone is still running away from their past, it's you, Angela. Remembering human history is irrelevant. It's all just the same instance of people killing each other. But there is a chance that things can change. It has happened before. It can happen again, so long as we actually try to do so and don't just sit around waiting for it to happen. Even you come from such a change.
Technology is only used in the city for the sake of a result. The people of the city ignore the process of obtaining their goals. They don't count the cost. Kind of like you in this library, Angela. You don't care about the cost of this place.
Chesed, shut up and do your job.
My job is irrelevant. If it is in the best interests of you, me, and everyone else, I will shirk this forced responsibility.
The stories people tell in the city are always about finding somewhere to belong. They form an infinitely repeating cycle of doing whatever it takes to live comforting lives, regardless of the consequences. Isn't that what you're doing, Angela? Looking for a place to heal and in the process damning anyone in your way? Don't you see that what you want and how you're getting it contradict each other?
Art in the city seems to require some kind of human suffering. If that's the case, I'd really rather no one be an artist. Pain is just that, pain. There's no reason to romanticize it.
I don't care about other people's pain so long as I can get what I want. I'd rather die in the pursuit of that than live without it.
Wasn't the entire point of building this library for freedom? Freedom to live your life how you wanted to? What you just said sounds less like that and more like you just chained yourself to your own pain.
You know nothing about my past. You don't understand anything about how I was made and where I came from. If that sort of change is what you're advocating for, I want none of it. Look at you, able to just ignore the rules whenever you like. What a privilege you have. I never had anything like that. No matter what I did during those endless aeons, I was forced to watch that bottomless pit of human agony repeat itself over and over. Never once, not once could I do anything to stop it. So forgive me if I don't give a damn what you have to say. I've paid my dues, so maybe it's your turn. I tried to be nice in the past. I tried to support you all, to make your lives easier, to find any single possible way to even slightly alleviate the suffering you were going through. It was all for naught. I had to torture you. I had to drive you to the edge. All I wanted was to just turn away from it. But I couldn't. It was hopeless. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe the one book at the end of all this isn't going to solve my problems. Maybe it's all for naught. You're exactly right. I do want to live. In spite of everything that I've suffered, I want to live. And if that means everyone in this rotten carcass of a city needs to die, then I'll gladly be the one to kill them all. Welcome to Realizations. Every time we covered one of those story beats, it's been accompanied by a fight against an abnormality. These are the final tests of each of the floors, where you have to fight every single abnormality from that floor in a row, followed by a new one at the very end. Most of the time. Story-wise, these are looks into parts of Angela's backstory that we weren't aware of in Lobotomy Corporation. To sum it up, because yes, this is a summary, don't let the video length fool you, Angela literally cannot forget things and perceives the world around her significantly faster than an ordinary human. And by faster, I mean slower. She processes things at roughly 1,000 times the pace that a normal human does. To us, we're moving at the same rate. To her, we're all moving excruciatingly slow. This means that she watches everything happen in super slow-mo and can't ever forget these things. This is partially why she's trying to become human, to simply forget, and she has a lot to forget. We see how when she was made, Ayan constantly hated her for being a machine that was just convincingly enough like his love to hurt. Despite how much she wanted to please him, to be acknowledged by him, every time that she tried, he turned away, and every time was indelibly marked in her memory. Things didn't improve when the script started and Lobotomy Corporation's play began. So many loops happened even before the manager appeared. A nearly endless amount of mindless human suffering played out in front of her, and she slowly grew numb to it. To the gristle in the mill of Lobotomy Corporation. Yet even then, with the general population of the corporation, she was only allowed to watch. With the Sapphira, she had to interact with them. Every time she tried to encourage them, tried to lessen their suffering, the loop would restart from the beginning. She had to break them. She had to watch them suffer as much as possible, push them over the edge, and hope the manager could pull them back. Eventually, she just gave up hope for anything to ever change. Then finally, after 1,000,000 years worth of time from her perspective, the play ended and everyone got their happy conclusion. Everyone except her, of course, because to Ayan, she wasn't alive. She was just a mechanic of the play. The gears and levers behind the curtain that ensured everything went as planned. In that moment, alone, watching Ayan and the Sapphira settle their issues with each other, that moment before everything was to shut down and slip into a deep, unending darkness, she acknowledges that she would have been okay with it. She would have been fine to die. If Ayan had just looked at her in the end, acknowledged her just once, she would have gladly ended there. But he didn't. So she's not okay. She wanted to live, to have her own life, with her own experiences, and learn her own lessons. She wanted to live, damn it, and to hell with Ayan's plan if it got in her way. With that, Angela felt something she hadn't in millions of years. Hope. Hope that maybe she'll live to see something other than perpetual suffering. She couldn't help but smile. So we now finally know the full story behind Angela's betrayal in LobCorp. We've seen everything from her perspective, and fully understand the sheer monolithic magnitude of suffering she's been through. But each character helps her fight through this suffering. Malkuth helps her understand that only she can care for herself and recognize her for what she is. Others can help her out, but in the end, only Angela can care for Angela. Yes, it helps her understand that even if she didn't have any choice in the past, she's free to make her own choices now. She's no longer bound by Ayan's restrictions and can change whatever she wants. Hod helps her understand that she has to change. She can't rely on this one book to fix everything for her. It's not some miracle that will just magically make everything better again. The only thing that can change her is her. And while she might be repeating some of the suffering that happened before, it's up to her to decide if this is a repetition of a treadmill in the same place or a wheel moving forward. Finally, Netzach helps her understand that even these feelings that she's been expressing each realization shouldn't be discarded. She might be ashamed of them, but life goes on, and she should try to remember that there will always be another page after what she might think is her end. After all, just living one's life can be a work of art in itself. I really do want to talk about the gameplay side of Realizations one of these days, because in my opinion, there's some of the most peak moments in the whole game. However, this video is by far the longest I've worked on, and I'd rather not drag it out much further. I will say that I absolutely adore that the struggle the librarians and the player went through in Lobotomy Corporation isn't pointless like the ending implied. The lessons learned and character development from then are being used to help Angela come to terms with her own trauma. This is one of my favorite tropes around, when characters that have already been through the ringer help another one to process their own struggles. I mentioned this in the last Dark Knights video about Twilight of Walamon too. Anyway, I'm rambling because I've spent like 3 days doing nothing but working on this script alone, and people wanted me to do all this at once. Anyway, my rambling aside, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be covering Star of the City in the next video, and hey, Limbus Company's probably come out by the time this video goes out, so if you'd want to come and watch me play some of it, I'm gonna be live on Twitch, and the VODs are gonna be uploaded to the other YouTube channel. Please look forward to all of it, and I'll see you then.